Hi everybody, Jared Morgenstern here. Today we're going to be talking with Daley from Legacy Wilderness Treatment Program. Derek is the co-founder of Legacy, and he's also a member of the Outdoor Behavioral Health Council. Derek's a great guy, and he's going to help us learn more about wilderness treatment. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and I hope you subscribe to the channel. Enjoy. Hi Derek, thanks very much for coming.
Yes.
I wanted to ask how you got involved in wilderness treatment.
Sure. So 17 years ago, I answered an ad in the paper to be a wilderness field guide. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, I'd been working at a professional employer organization where I wore a tie every day, and it didn't have meaning and purpose, and I had this vision that I could see myself wearing this tie for the next 15 years, and so I took a sabbatical, went to Alaska, had a wilderness experience. I was fascinated by stories like Into the Wild and Everett Roos, and so went kind of chasing, trying to find myself, came back and answered the ad and went out for a program in southern Utah, and been sitting in circles out in the desert ever since.
Can you describe what wilderness treatment is? I get a lot of questions from families and even from other providers, sometimes. Sure. Just like, I've heard about wilderness treatment. What is it?
Yeah, what wilderness wilderness therapy is really a simple way to put it. Is we've been out there for a very long time, and we take skilled therapy. These are master's level therapists and psychologists and healthcare professionals who are working with clients, and we're really replacing the couch for the wilderness environment. Well, oftentimes I get asked the question, and I might be jumping ahead here, why does wilderness therapy work?
You're jumping ahead, but I invite that, please. Okay. Yeah.
So, and really it's like...
Or does it work? Maybe like the assumption, right, for someone watching, right, is that, you have a perspective, but like,
sure.
So why does it work? I think that is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think to think about in context, if we're treating like picture a 13-year-old who's got anxiety issues, and she's coming into weekly therapy, right, and you're just really trying to gain some ground in therapy, and so you work on it, and then they come back. Now picture yourself as a clinician being able to work with that person for 70 days. Mm-hmm. In a closed environment where instead of on a couch with her anxiety coming up, she's now on a mountain bike, engaging in these healthy activities in somewhat of a healthy container with a healthy peer group in a wilderness environment under the stars, where it just opens ourselves up to self-connection, to connection to the outer world. It is a shortcut 100% for effective therapy. In fact, a lot of our therapists have and do run private practices. And they get so impatient in their private practices after having been in wilderness therapy because they see change. Yeah, because they see change happen so quickly in the wilderness environment. But to circle back to your question, it's the wilderness therapy is the prescriptive use of therapy in a wilderness environment. It's structured, it has therapy, and then there's outdoor behavioral health care, and then there's accreditation. So there's, anybody can go out there and do wilderness therapy, but an OBH accredited program or outdoor behavioral health care, that's kind of, they're setting a standard for wilderness therapy.
That's actually really good to know. I didn't realize that there was a body that was assessing effectiveness in wilderness treatment.
Sure,
That's great.
I would encourage that would be the recommendation. Anybody looking into wilderness therapy, I would start at an OBH accredited program for sure.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
One of the things that you made me think of, you talked about this idea of connection. And I'm wondering the role that ritual plays. I think that one of the things I see in my work with clients in private practice is there's a real lack of ritual in our culture right now, especially for young folks. What do you see? What does wilderness treatment provide in regards to ritual, and does it have an importance?
I mean, I can completely agree. I think ritual, ceremony, rites of passage, I think these are things in our society or in our culture that we don't have easy access to. And the ones that we do have oftentimes are negative, like getting into a fraternity or something like that.
The first time getting drunk.
All those things. Those are like rites of passage. And so in a lot of ways, wilderness therapy is that. And in fact, like our young men who come into the program often have reached a point where they're not performing. Families coming in to say, hey, you need something. similar to traditional rites of passage, right? Is there's a little pushing of the community and resisting. Like, I don't know if I want to go out, and that's healthy. So a lot of our young men who are getting kind of pushed into this experience, that's a natural part of rites of passage too. But then when you get out there on the ground with a community that is maintaining a culture and talking about things like honorable manhood or honorable personhood, what does it mean to have integrity? How do we navigate technology in this world under the stars? It's inherently a sacred space where it's easy to bring in sacredness and meaningfulness, and so it's ripe for ceremony. And what you find from a lot of the outcome studies just is when people speak to the experiences, even 25 years ago, how they discovered a part of who they are and their identity through the wilderness experience.
You know, I'm really touched by this idea of this internal-external connection, right? That people are developing, especially young people, right, are developing a sense of their internal experience, their internal life, right? But sometimes in our culture, they're doing it outside the context of an external world, right? Like, you know, this idea of, you said, of what is technology under the stars? Like what a profoundly important question, you know? Is that even answerable? I mean, you know, but to contend with what it means to be a part of this earth, to be a part of living and life. I hear the connection.
Sure. Right now in our society, and as a conversation, we're seeing more and more people get back to kind of simple things like nature. Like even here in New York, you know, we're having meetings, and we were meeting with a doctor who's got this ion board under her desk that connects her to grounding. It's supposed to replicate like the earth, right? And because she's wanting that, craving that earth connection. And so I think we are having a conversation where here we are, you know, 2018, and we're gravitating back to really simple things work, like spending a little time by a stream, like has a profound effect. And so I'm a big proponent of not just, you know, outdoor behavioral health care and wilderness therapy, but how can we take some of these concepts into elementary schools, into our daily lives? Because if I was talking to people right now, I would say go spend 15 minutes outside. Even in New York, there's a way to connect with nature and do a little pre-post yourself. And see, in fact, that's
pre-post meaning pre-post testing.
Yeah, for yourself.
Yeah,
you know, a lot of times I talk people. That's another question I get: why wilderness therapy works. It's like, okay, go outside today and spend 20 minutes in wilderness versus what you're planning, and tell me if there's a difference. Now imagine doing that for 60 days.
You know, one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you is because you're very passionate about this, and I think it's a really important message because it goes beyond. You know, people who are arriving in wilderness treatment are there for particular reasons. You know, sometimes it's about other treatment failing. Sometimes it's about just feeling overwhelmed in their home space, in their school space. But that there are lessons to be derived, right, from what you just described in everyday. You know, if you take it out of like a treatment program context, how do we invite in a wilderness experience, essentially, right? That's really profound.
Why are not why does wilderness therapy work, but why are we still doing therapy on a couch? I think that's a better question. No,
I do not feel attacked. I do not.
You know, and really, it's because that's what we're talking about. We're just talking about the environment. We're not. I mean, we're talking about change, for example. You talked about internalized change. I mean, that's the goal, right? And we start like in the wilderness. We train our guys to start with investment. You know, how do we get them investment? Well, we focus on relationship. We focus on empathy. We focus on creating a space that they can feel welcomed into. Then once they're showing up and they're engaged, then we can move into identification.
You know,
self-awareness work. You know, mindfulness.
You're absolutely touching me here because I think a lot about when I work with young people, and I do work on a couch. You're right, and that I do. You know, and that is part of my framework, and I'm glad that you're challenging me. I think that's important. What is it like to love someone? You know, to really love somebody, to give that to someone, to take love from someone. I mean, I can't tell you how much of the work that I do is about values. What do you believe in? Not what do your parents believe in? Not what does your faith believe in, which I think is important. What do you believe in? And does your behavior, is what you're doing moving you toward those values, or away from them?
I think doing values clarification work is the right off the get, and being able to show, like, have you been living in line? And I think it's the beginning of doing real identity work, which I think so many of these guys that's what they're doing. They're on a journey just like I was in Alaska as a young kid, trying to uncover. And so often, it's unfortunate because what I see in our society is people having lack of connection, having lack of purpose, and then not feeling that there's this void or this darkness, and particularly young men and young women do it as well. They turn that into a darkness. Something's wrong with me, I'm broken. And so they develop this internal narrative that's negative, and really it's just confused, and it's part of the human process in our society. It's like, you're fine.
What role do stories play in wilderness treatment? Because what I think you just described, because I think what you're saying was really important. You know, the story that they are telling themselves about themselves, right? Or how deeply we believe the story that's been written about us.
Story plays a big role, and I think of narrative therapy, right? Our own story plays a really big, and can we shift that and look at that? I think that's really, really important, especially when we get into internalized work. Like, let's hear your story, and is that narrative changing as we're starting to look? And that's an indicator that we're getting somewhere, right? There's things that we can look at to say, are you in identification work? Do we need to do some more self-awareness, or are you really moving into creating that narrative? And there is a long tradition of sitting around a fire, sharing stories, sharing our own story, right, is absolutely profound. As a professional, I have a story, and it's a great tool. It's not my only tool, and if it was my only tool, then I'm not a professional, right? To be a professional, I have to have a graph, right? But I'm going to start with, what do I got? The first thing I have is a story, and that's going to be one of my most powerful tools now and forever. To balance that out, though, we've got to add other tools. But back to story, I think that, like, sitting around a campfire, you have your hot drinks, your tea, getting ready, and the stars are out, and somebody's sharing a story. Those are probably the most powerful sacred spaces.
Timeless.
Oh yeah.
You know, you're making me think. I can't tell you how many times I've said to therapists, what's the story you're telling yourself about you in the room? Like, what is your story in the room? Who do you think you are in the room, right? Because we have our own story that we carry with us into these situations. And once we do that, I wonder how that impacts our bias, our approach.
I talk about a metaphor, and I'll talk about it even with the clients of, I think therapy oftentimes is kind of like throwing darts in a dark room. In a dark room, right? Because I think if you're a good therapist, you hit a lot and you get that validation. But if you forget that you're in a dark room, and the only way you know is if the client tells you, like, that was a hit, right? Because sometimes I think we can convince ourselves that we just hit all the time. And we're just going to keep throwing that. And we have to have that conversation, explore. So I always tell the clients, let me know when I miss or when we miss, and so we can get back online. And so they can really be a part of it. But
I've even asked systems, treatment centers and other systems,